Hello everyone, welcome to Stealth video series. You have finally made it. You are a lawful permanent resident of the United States. You can now live and work in America permanently and have access to the many other benefits of lawful permanent residency similar to a US citizen. Before you get too excited though, you might be wondering, can you lose your permanent residency? In fact, yes, you can. But only in very specific circumstances. Let's take a look. What is a permanent resident? Once you get your green card, you are a permanent resident of the US. There are many benefits to being a lawful permanent resident. If you haven't already gone through the process of applying for a green card, you can also find tips to apply for your green card here. The focus of this article will be, can you lose your permanent residency once you have already obtained it? Can you lose your permanent residency? Even though permanent residency provides you with a permanent right to live and work in the US, you can still lose your permanent residency. There are actually a variety of reasons you could lose your permanent residency. Unfortunately, losing your permanent residency could lead to deportation. Losing your permanent residency doesn't happen automatically though. In most cases, if any of the below scenarios apply, you will have a chance to defend yourself in an immigration court. It may also only come up once you try to apply for naturalization, US citizenship. When you apply to become a US citizen, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, will have a few questions to ask, and they will also scrutinize your permanent resident status. If there is anything that could cause you to lose your permanent residency status that wasn't picked up before, there is a good chance it will be picked up then. So how can you then lose your permanent residency? 5 ways to lose your permanent residency. Below we look at the 5 common reasons you could lose your permanent residency. This isn't an exhaustive list though, so if you are concerned, you might lose your lawful permanent resident status. Consult an immigration attorney. Live outside the United States status for too long. If you are a green card holder and you live outside of the US for too long, you could lose your permanent resident status. This is considered abandonment of your permanent residency status. Generally, this would be where you spend more than 12 months outside of the US without special permission. Shorter absences can, however, also trigger abandonment if the Customs and Border Protection (CBP) officer believes you intended to live outside of the US. You might leave the US with no intention to abandon your permanent resident status, for example, to take care of a sick family member. However, your absence could still show a different intention. If you need to leave the US for an extended amount of time, plan well and prepare. Make sure you know exactly what to do and what not to do while you are outside of the US. If you need to leave for an extended period, apply for a re-entry permit. A re-entry permit can allow you to be out of the US for up to 24 months without leading to the abandonment of permanent resident status. Here are also some things you can do to show you haven't abandoned your lawful permanent resident status. Make sure you file your taxes on time while you are outside of the US. Buy a home or sign a long-term lease in the US. Don't have a permanent home anywhere outside the US, except if it is only for holiday purposes. Open a bank account in the US and get a US driver's license. Choosing to surrender your permanent residency. Lawful permanent residents can also voluntarily surrender their permanent residency by filing a Form I-407, Record of Abandonment of Lawful Permanent Resident Status. It may sound odd that some would voluntarily give up their lawful permanent resident status. Still, it is actually more common than you think. The most popular reason people voluntarily surrender lawful permanent residency is to escape the obligation to pay tax in the US. Also, be careful. There are cases where a CBP officer can ask individuals to sign a Form I-470. This would be where the CBP officer believes you have abandoned your permanent resident status, as discussed above. If a CBP officer asks you to sign this form, you aren't obliged to. Unless you want to abandon your lawful permanent resident status, you definitely shouldn't. Generally, you have the right to defend yourself from removal proceedings, but if you sign the Form I-407, you give up this right. Willful misrepresentation or fraud. This would be where you have lied to obtain immigration benefits. Any information you have provided in your immigration attempts, which is not 100% the truth, can be regarded as willful misrepresentation or fraud. It doesn't matter at what stage in the process it happened: preparing documents, providing evidence, interview, etc. If the USCIS finds out you lied, you can lose your permanent resident status. This most often happens when individuals want to apply for naturalization. One of the most common cases of immigration fraud is marriage fraud. Getting married to a US citizen is one of the quickest way to get a green card. Many people get married just to get a green card and then get divorced later. This is marriage fraud, and if the USCIS finds out your marriage was fraudulent, you could be deported. Being convinced of a crime. Certain actions and crimes are known as deportable offenses, which could lead to you losing your permanent resident status. Not all criminal convictions will lead to this, however. There isn't a precise list of deportable offenses, but generally, the following could lead to you losing your permanent resident status. If you committed a crime involving moral turpitude within your first 5 years in the US, which is punishable by a sentence of at least 1 year. If you are convicted as an aggravated felony at any time after you have entered the US, you are in possession of illegal drugs. Remember, this isn't an exhaustive list. If you are concerned about a crime you have committed, no matter how small, it would be a good idea to discuss it with an immigration attorney. They will be able to advise whether your specific action could be a deportable offense. Failing to remove conditions on your status. If you are a spouse who obtained residence through your marriage, or you are a foreign national investor, you would first have received a 2-year conditional permanent residency. To move over to permanent residency, you must file a petition to remove the conditions of your residency 90 days before your green card expires. For investors, you would have to file a Form I-829. Petition by entrepreneur to remove condition. If you married a US citizen, you have to file a Form I-751. Petition to remove the conditions of residence. If you don't file the petition before the expiration date of your green card, you will be placed in removal proceedings. You will also lose your permanent resident status. So, can you lose your permanent residency? Yes, you can. Despite permanent residency being permanent, there are situations where you could lose your lawful permanent resident status. Fortunately, it doesn't happen that easily. If you are faced with a possibility of losing your permanent residency, the best thing you can do is contact an immigration attorney you trust who can help guide you through the process. We hope this video has been helpful to you. At Stilt, we provide financial services for immigrants and the underserved. Subscribe to our channel and visit stilt.com for more details.